I will take your questions. I'll start with Associated Press.
On the spy balloon, can you give us an update on what sort of intelligence the U.S. has been able to gather from the balloon, and speak to reports that the balloon was able to transmit intelligence back to China that the U.S. could not prevent?
Sure. So I'll take the first, your last question first. So on the balloon itself, right now, the FBI is the lead, still assessing the parts that we were able to recover from the balloon. As we mentioned early on when we first started tracking the balloon, we do know that the balloon was able to be maneuvered and purposely driven along its track, but not going to get into specific sites it was able to hover over. But what we did do is take precautionary steps to limit the intelligence value that it would be able to collect. And again, we took steps to protect our own military installations from foreign intelligence collection. And I'm sorry, I think you had another question on the balloon, but I just didn't remember the second part.
It was on the being able to transmit to China. Sure. And were you able to prevent intelligence from some of these sites from China being able to collect from the balloon?
Because of the steps that we were able to take, we were able to prevent transmission of certain aspects of our sites to be transmitted, just because of the precautionary steps that we were able to take. But in terms of transmission back to the PRC and what was able to be transmitted back, I just don't have further information for you at this time. As of right now, we're still doing an assessment of what exactly the intel was that China was able to gather, but we do know that the steps that we took provided little additive value for what they've been able to collect on from satellites before. Jennifer.
Sabrina, back to the spy balloon. Is there new analysis suggesting that the Chinese were able to collect in real time more intelligence from the spy balloon than you first realized?
No, I think what we said at the very beginning was still holds true to today. As soon as we realized that they were collecting intelligence and hovering over our sensitive sites, we took measures and put into place measures that limited the additive value that the balloon could collect on.
So did you know at the time that they were able to transmit back in real time to Beijing?
Well, I wouldn't be able to say that they were able to transmit back to Beijing. We just don't have, I just don't have that type of information at this point.
So you're saying that is not confirmed at this point?
That is not confirmed at this point.
And how confident are you that the mitigation measures that you took actually worked? Or is there new evidence suggesting that some intelligence was collected despite the mitigation efforts?
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. So we are confident in the measures that we did put in place. I know I sound like a broken record. I don't mean to, but what we know is that the intent of this balloon was surveillance, and that the measures that we put in place did not had limited additive value for what they were able to collect over our sensitive sites.
Maybe you mean that the mitigation efforts limited?
Correct. I'm sorry. The mitigation efforts that we put into place had little additive value for the PRC.
Okay. And is it true that you've learned that the spy balloon had the ability to self-destruct and did not self-destruct, and do you know why?
I just wouldn't be able to say at this time. That's something that, as I mentioned earlier, the FBI is looking into at Quantico, and we are certainly in touch with them. We've offered resources to the FBI, but I just wouldn't be able to comment further at this time. I'll go to Idris in the back.
Just to double check, I'm understanding the balloon.
Sure.
You can confirm that there was real-time transmission back over military bases, right? But
I cannot confirm that there was real-time transmission back from the balloon back to the PRC at this time.
Specifically?
Correct. I cannot confirm that.
And your analysis is ongoing on that?
Correct.
Okay.
I'll come to Laura and then go to Matt.
First of all, follow up on the spy balloon.
Sure.
Is it possible that China could have collected sensitive information from military sites before you put these measures in place? Was there time for that to happen?
On the balloon and on your first question on being able to collect data over military sites, I mean, you have to remember that we started tracking the balloon around January 27th. So when the balloon was coming over and up through the United States, dipped into Canada, and then dipped back down, we were already taking precautionary measures at this time to mitigate any type of intelligence collection that the balloon would be able to pick up. And I think by that point, we had already identified that it was a PRC-affiliated balloon. So I think the measures that we put in place certainly limited what the PRC was able to collect, and that was on due diligence on our part.
You were able to predict the path of the balloon, so you knew what it was going to go over?
I don't think we would say that we were able to predict the path, but we were following the balloon. And as it did traverse over sensitive military sites, and as we mentioned early on, January, early February, we did see the balloon begin to hover over military sites. That certainly gave us pause. And
Re-entered the United States,
correct.
right?
Okay. Yeah. When it dipped back down through Canada, yes.
Thanks, Sabrina. I just had one quick
Sure.
one on the balloon. When you talk about the mitigation efforts that the U.S. took, my understanding was that was mostly involving kind of limiting the information footprint, limiting the signals that the U.S. was using so as to not leave very much for that balloon to be able to intercept or to scoop up. Can you say whether there were also efforts to intercept any outgoing transmissions from the balloon as it maybe tried to transmit back to Beijing?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, that gets into our intelligence capabilities, which I just wouldn't be able to speak to on that front, so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Dan. And then
Thanks. Just on the balloon. When you say that you can't confirm that it was transmitting, the balloon was transmitting back to China, is that because that's classified, or that's because the Defense Department does not know, cannot determine that?
That's a great question. That's something that we're analyzing right now. That's something that we've been looking into. That's why we're doing some of the analysis at Quantico, and I just don't have an update for you on that just yet.
So when do you anticipate this assessment would be wrapped up?
I don't want to put a timeline on anything, as that could take a while, but it's certainly something that we can get back to you on.
And is it still possible that as you go back over old data, using the information you now have since that incident, that there were other balloon flights in U.S. airspace that have not so far been recognized or publicly acknowledged?
Well, we did mention at the time there were previous balloons in and around the United States and during the previous administration. Is that what you're referring to? Or
Yes, you did acknowledge
Yeah.
a certain number during the Biden and Trump administrations. I'm asking, were there more flights that you've since recognized or you think you might recognize as you go over old
No,
data?
not that I'm aware of. I think that's all that we assessed, and I don't have any other data to indicate otherwise. But it's certainly something that we continue to assess, and that's how we knew going back that we did see 3 incursions during the Trump administration and then 1 at the start of the Biden administration.
So, if you could, would it be possible for the Defense Department to release more information about the previous flight during the Biden administration? Exactly what happened? What was the response? Were you aware that it was a Chinese airship? Did you believe it was a Chinese balloon?
I think during this time earlier this year we did give you some of those details. So I'm happy to go back and find out if there's any more that we can release at this time. But I just don't have anything more to share at this moment.
Sorry, and then I'm going to throw you one more separate.
I hope it's a balloon question.
It's not balloon,
Okay.
sadly for you.